Hello and welcome to the Brother Augustine channel, where my guests and I seek to edify, educate, and entertain the world from an Orthodox Christian perspective. Today's video is an Orthodox business profile for a coffee company called Lore Roasters, started by my Orthodox friends here, Grayson and Nick. So before we get started, thank you guys for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had some of your coffee this morning, and my parish has been enjoying it for the last couple of weeks. So thank you guys for sending that out. Yeah, we had the North Hill brand, which we'll get to in a little while here. Before we get to the specific coffees, I wanted to ask you guys, what inspired you to come up with an Orthodox coffee company? You know, you got a little, is it a seraphim there, the logo?
Yeah, I'll get it real close real quick for the view.
That's very cool.
How did we get inspired to do this?
I mean, ultimately, Grace and I are both 27 years old, and we're both in similar situations where we needed to put our feet down and start working on something, building careers. And we live in a fairly remote area, and so there aren't exactly jobs galore. And my background is coffee, specialty coffee, and Grayson had been operating and running a business that he owned for about a year or so, and had more background in managing businesses and so on and so forth. And I knew he was a hard worker, creative person, and I knew I would love to start a coffee company if I ever had the opportunity to do it. But there's a whole lot involved with running a business that I knew that if I were to attempt to do it all myself, it would be much slower and less efficient, and all around not as fun and productive. So Grayson was the first person I thought of approaching to be a business partner and to go in on this with me. And he actually had like no background with coffee at all. He didn't even drink coffee at the time.
Nope.
He assumed that basically all coffee was just kind of like I don't know, what would you say, like a drug? Like it was like everyone he knew, like who was drinking coffee, was dependent on it, and it just kind of like you just drink your morning cup of joe to drag yourself out of bed and go on to the rat race kind of thing. And that sort of perspective, like I understood, was like not exactly appealing or something one would admire from someone who had never really drank coffee. But my perspective with coffee is that there's a craft behind it, and whether you respect the craft and pour everything into it and really try to focus on all the various details that one can do, and really try to put forth and create something of quality, similar to like fine wine or craft beer or leatherworks, and anything that one would dedicate himself to. And that was my experience, is that that there's more to it than just a mindless consumable. And so Grayson was like, I gotta try some of that first. Let me see if is there anything to this other than the nonsense sludge that he knew. And was able to procure some coffee samples, and we had a sample roaster.
Very generous guys from all over the place.
And we roasted some coffee, and I knew what was possible, and Grayson didn't. He started to try this coffee together and was blown away. And at that point, we kind of knew that we were kind of more unified in our understanding of what our craft was. But I guess to speak to like why we have a seraphim on our bag is ultimately we wouldn't put forth like I don't know, we are two Christian guys running a coffee business, and we're trying to do high quality stuff. And in the specialty coffee world, you see a lot of different companies being edgy.
Really edgy.
With like skulls and snakes and stuff like that.
Thorned roses and like like flash art, things like that.
And it's like even worse things, just like demonic things, and then
skeletons, dead people. It's kind of weird.
And for the longest time, and really still to this day, no one knows who we are. So if you're going to participate in like buy specialty coffee, you're going to be supporting businesses that are, trying to push certain agendas onto their community, even in areas where that sort of thing is not present at all. It just seems to always be the case that there's a rainbow flag or something somewhere, and it's always so. Mm-hmm. We felt that if we're going to do this and we're going to enter that market, we're going to we're kind of intense people. So we can be edgy too. So let's put a seraphim on our bag. And the response that we've seen has been kind of hilarious. Everyone we know in the church thinks it's awesome. But
yeah, they're like, oh, this is great.
We've had a few instructive pieces of criticism from various Protestant fellas that were kind of scared by it. They thought it was demonic looking.
It can and we understand where they're coming from. It's just something that's more abrasive, I suppose. And so that tells us and informs us that we hit it right on the mark for exactly how we want to do.
If the Orthodox like it and Protestants don't, then you got what you were going for, huh?
Bingo. Yeah.
We tried to be keep like our spiritual father involved in
the entire time, yeah.
In like the initial idea phase, like should we do this? Should we pursue this? And and fortunately, we were given the blessing to pursue it, and the door just kept opening and opening. We tried to give every opportunity for God to say, "This is a foolish idea. Go learn a trade or something." And it just never happened. And so, every step we took, doors opened, and we'd meet people who wanted to help. And now we're sitting in this humongous 8,000 square foot modern piece of architecture that's kind of out of place in terms of like where it is. I feel like I'm in a mansion in the Alps somewhere, but
yeah,
it's just like really nice. Like we started this business and we meet certain people that are willing to put our business in their space, and so now we're operating in a really nice building with business professionals and a co-working space. So getting a lot of exposure because of that.
Well, thank God. So how did you guys come up with the name Lore?
We probably spent, oh gosh, I don't know, a full month with, what about this name? No. What about this name? No. What about this name? No. Just like constantly. What about this? We could do this. These colors. We could do this. These colors. We actually came up. We were almost going to settle on another name that was like way too edgy. And
what was it?
It was Loyalist.
Loyalist.
And we were going to have that flag, the Byzantine double eagle. And our priest was like, I get it, but some, the time. The times that we're in, probably not the best move. So yeah, people wouldn't think that we're maybe
talking about Russia
or something like that. Where it's like, no, it's talking about ancient Byzantium and Christianity, but it just, I don't know, there's such a disconnect that it just wasn't the right move. And he's right. We came up with and ended on Lore because it's short, it's memorable, and there are more than one meanings for it. So lore just means like the history and the tradition behind X, Y, or Z, something. And so for us, it's the history and tradition behind coffee, good coffee, then specialty coffee, and where we are now in the modern age, and how all this came about and came to be, and what is possible. And then also for us, with the more subdued angle with the seraphim, and there is a cross on the back as well. So put that there. Separating our letters, one for each of the gospel, how you have L-O-R-E, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. It's like pays homage to, some people just don't know what that is because they're not familiar with the lore, to say, of Christianity, of what ancient Christianity is, and the imagery and the iconography that's been surrounding us for 2,000 years is right there on a bag. It's all over the church, it's something like that. So it's a nice little mwah to, it's really good coffee and the history and the tradition behind good coffee, but also, our imagery and who we are. We're trying to, and we've stepped into this ancient church and this ancient world and the history and traditions behind Jesus Christ and his ministry on earth. And we like that perfect synthesis with our coffee.
Yeah. And even to be more specific into like what is specialty coffee, and essentially specialty coffee is the story behind this cup of coffee. So
And which flavor are you drinking there, Nick?
right now I'm drinking Colombia. It's a natural Colombia, so natural processed Colombia, which not everyone understands that there are various stages to that a coffee bean, which is a seed, has to go through in order to get to this point. And one of the primary parts of that long process is actually called the processing method. And so this is a natural process. For natural processed coffee, the beans, which are actually coffee seeds, which are within a cherry grown on the tree, that those seeds are dried with the cherry intact. So all of the fruit flesh and mucus and sugar and acidity and juiciness is kind of further more enhanced and pressed onto the seed, as opposed to a traditional method of processing coffee. Most coffee is processed in what's called a washed process method, where one would take the seeds out of the cherry and put it in a fermentation tank, a bunch of water, and essentially strip everything off. So you take the seeds out of the cherry and then you put it in these tanks and everything is removed. So you have this like really clean seed and then it's dried. So
I actually have a visual example, but I'd have to move the camera. So here is actually a representation, a visual representation. This is a washed from Colombia as well. I believe a different region, but it's still the same country. I believe almost even the same plant species. But this is a nice, even, like grain color,
light green.
almost light green, very nice, good smell to it. And the one that he's drinking right now has gone through the natural process, which actually comes out looking like that through the end of it. So as you can tell, there's a variation in different colors of the beans. A lot of that is due to the different, I guess, degrees of the cherry and the juices and the acidity being contained within or on the outside of the bean really tightly. And so that yields, consequently, a flavor which is, as you would expect, quite fruity.
Yeah, a natural processed coffee is going to taste sweeter and more fruit-like. Coffee, it is a fruit. It's a cherry, and we are extracting the seed and then roasting the seed before we grind it and put water to it.
Yeah.
With what we're trying to do is we want to kind of showcase what natural flavors are inherent in every unique coffee from all around the world. And so, but one of the varying factors is that processing method.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that walkthrough. I don't know much about the process of making coffee myself, and that was a great visual, Grayson, showing the wash versus natural processing. So that kind of leads into my next question, which is that right now you guys have 6 different flavors, right? So how do you go from the natural processed seeds that you just showed me? How do you go from that to 6 different flavors? Like, how do you add the different ones? At what point in the process do you usually add them in?
Are you talking about adding flavors? Is that what you mean? Or what do you mean?
Or how do you get from the natural processed seed to different flavors, or are they just different flavors to begin with?
I believe it's to begin with. That's a good question. That is a good question. I believe it's to begin with. It depends. Well, let's just walk back a bit. You'll see on our website, you'll see on our bags, everything will be kind of the name of it and then also the notes. So cherry liqueur, strawberry, and honey. That doesn't mean we poured those things on the beans necessarily.
Gotcha.
That is what came out of this bean, or this plant, this bean, this location, this elevation, everything, and how it ended up in the cup.
And then how we roasted it.
How we roasted and what we could find in the flavors that were inherent in the cup all by itself, nothing added, nothing like that.
The roasting process is really what unlocks or restricts those natural flavors from being present in the cup of coffee. So I could take the same coffee and roast it 2 different ways, and one might be close to that precise measure where you're getting those strawberry, cherry liqueur-like flavors, tasting some honey, that kind of thing. Which it actually, with certain coffees, this one in particular, those things are actually really present. Which natural processing method coffees kind of is almost like a cheat code. It makes all these flavors very, very forward in your face, whereas the washed coffees are often more subtle, and so they're harder to roast to get those flavors out, to get like what's naturally there. Whereas if you maybe roasted it slightly darker than you wanted to with a natural process, so long as you didn't really over roast it or make it go too hot, you're gonna still taste all those flavors. It could just maybe be tweaked a little bit better. Whereas the wash, if you take it a little too far, it might taste a little more baked. And so you went from like a really nuanced, complex, delicate coffee to, well, okay, it tastes like coffee, just in a matter of like 30 seconds of and too much heat towards the end of the roast, that kind of thing. So we're roasting kind of lighter, and we're in a light to medium range, because once you roast past like a really solid medium roast, you start to taste a lot of roast, really. To put in an analogy, if you think about steak, we could take a piece of really nice Wagyu beef ribeye, and then take a piece of ribeye from your random grocery store, not in like the special organic section or whatever, just a random piece of meat, and you grill them to medium roast or medium rare, and they're going to be very different in how they taste. Very, very obvious which one is special and which one is not. Which one was cared for in the processing method and on the farm, which one wasn't. And but if you were to grill them both to a well done or very well done, they're going to taste very, very similar. It's the same thing with coffee. So that's why we generally roast to no darker than a medium roast. We're more willing to kind of get flexible with like wholesale clients, that kind of thing, if they want to put like coffee in their own labeled bag, that kind of thing. But for us, we're really trying to focus on what coffee can be, so that we can actually tell that story. If I roast it too far, it becomes my story, really. It's no longer the story of the coffee. So.
Okay. Well,
maybe that answered the question.
Yeah, totally. Again, I appreciate the explanation, because I've been drinking coffee since college, but I've never known anything about how it's made. But I'm glad we have an Orthodox alternative now, because typically you just go to Starbucks and you berate yourself for paying a woke corporation for your coffee, and now we don't have to do that anymore. And me and my parish have been enjoying the North Hill flavor, like I mentioned earlier, which was brown sugar, raspberry, and dark chocolate. And I can tell you guys honestly, everyone who tried this stuff really liked it. And you just showed us the Columbia there. Would you mind walking us through the rest of your variety of flavors here, with a word about the notes that you're trying to bring out in the coffee?
Yeah, good idea. We could start with the one you actually just saw, which was the other Columbia, which is the washed process. If you want to go with that.
Yeah, so these are both Colombian coffees, and they're grown nearby in different regions, but this is a great starting point to kind of showcase what we were just talking about with the difference between a washed coffee and a natural coffee.
Right.
They're from the same exact country, grown at similar altitudes, and both grown by farmers that are craftsmen. They do a great job. But because one coffee was processed differently than the other, they taste drastically differently.
Which are both fantastic flavors.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, this is what coffee can be. It can be like this or it can be like that, but they're drastically different. So the one we were just looking at was the natural coffee, cherry liqueur, strawberry, and honey. The washed coffee, the washed Columbia, we get more of like plum and raisin, mild citrus. And it's definitely got more of a lighter body to it, and maybe a little more herbal in its flavor composition. And I guess the next one we should talk about is the Ethiopian. These are the 3 single origin coffees that we're offering right now, the 2 Colombians and then this coffee from Ethiopia. And this one is a really delicate coffee. We get more floral notes out of it, and some blueberry when it's brewed well, and a little bit of raspberry jam, kind of just like sweetness. But Ethiopian, it's also a natural process. Natural Ethiopian coffees are iconic for being like blueberry juice bombs. Just kind of like, it's like the first coffee a lot of people's first specialty coffee experience where it kind of blew their mind and like made them realize that coffee can be something totally different than what they're used to.
That actually was my experience.
Is a natural Ethiopia. They just tend to be very, very forward and blueberry-esque, and it's a very identifiable flavor note. A lot of times with coffee, and when you're in this kind of delicate coffee world, the coffee flavor notes are not exactly pinpointable. It's not like you're tasting one specific thing. Often, sometimes it's more like I'm not sure if it's strawberry, raspberry, or cherry, but it's definitely red fruit, that kind of thing. But in this example with the natural Ethiopia, we get a pretty poignant blueberry. So I really wanted to showcase that coffee. It's one of the reasons why we chose natural Ethiopia for our first go about in our first series of coffees, is to maybe help people have that sort of experience. And next coffee is our first blend. It's the 3 Mile blend. We're actually basically the neighborhood of our town is called 3 Mile. It's 3 miles from the center of town, and so colloquially it's just known as 3 Mile.
Yeah.
So this is where we are. So we're roasting. This is where we got our opportunity to do the business. So our first blend, our house blend, what we're going to have in like carafes, brewed drip coffee in our shop, and often in rotation for espresso, it's going to be the 3 Mile blend. And it's a collection of 3 different coffees. One is a natural Brazil, and one is another Ethiopia, and then also the washed Colombia that I was just referencing. That is actually a component in there. And so this is more of a true medium roast. It's nice. It's really good black. It's also good paired with milk or sugar. My wife likes it. If she's willing to let me force her to drink black coffee, she's content with this. But also, she can throw cream and sugar in it, and I can drink it black. So I can brew it both at the same time. We're both content. It's been pretty popular with the customers that have tried it thus far. And then the North Hill blend is what you guys have had. And it's a little bit darker than the 3 Mile. It's still in the medium roast range, but definitely a little bit darker. And actually, it's the exact same 3 coffees as the 3 Mile, just in a different ratio. So there's more Brazil in this, which the Brazil is going to bring forth more of a chocolatey and earthy like undertone. So it kind of is our way of giving you the darker roast flavor notes, without roasting it dark roast, is by making the most prominent coffee in a blend this Brazil, which has those notes naturally in it. So this one is a crowd pleaser. A lot of people like this, and it is really good as espresso or drip coffee. This is a coffee we designed this blend to be in a coffee shop on their mainstay in their espresso grinder hopper, and so but it is also a good black. But this was our attempt to give something that everyone will most likely like.
Yeah.
No matter how you prepare it too. What were you gonna say?
Oh no, the flavors with that North Hill, the one that you've been enjoying so much. The reason why we went with more Brazils, because those flavors will punch through milk, which seems to mute a lot of the more delicate flavors. But that Brazil is like a nice hearty dark chocolate, and so it also takes with it the other more notes like the raspberry and the brown sugar, and so it's fantastic for like lattes or anything that involves milk to any degree, because it'll punch right through it, and you will know that there's good coffee in this for certain.
I actually had this morning with milk, and that's absolutely true. I could still
Really?
taste the flavors in the coffee. Yeah.
Glory to God for that.
That's great. And that's in contrast, that coffee compared to say that Ethiopian, it just wouldn't be the same experience with milk. The Ethiopian and the natural Colombia, especially those two, they'd be fine with milk, but really they're going to be best black, and because they're going to be a little bit more acidity. There's going to be a little more acidity in the cup, a little more floral and fruit flavors. So Yeah, so that's just a good contrast. The last coffee that we have is a decaf coffee, and it's also a Colombia. It seems like the best decaf coffees are found in Colombia and or Ethiopia. Reason being is that Ethiopia and Colombia are like the two biggest mainstays in coffee. They have huge, they have their whole like national industry is kind of wrapped up in coffee. It's one of the biggest exports for both of their countries. And so with that, you have enough people with bigger farms or processing areas that they're willing to dedicate towards decaf, because basically decaf coffee is regular coffee. It can be the exact same coffee as another bag that I have, but it went through various methods that extract the decaf out. And there are multiple ways of doing that. A lot of people go with what's called a Swiss water method. And essentially you take the coffee and you put it in water and you soak it for a long time, then drain it, then you add more water, soak and drain until it reaches a point of as uncaffeinated as it could possibly get. What we chose to go with is pretty popular recently in specialty coffee. It's called an ethyl acetate process, which essentially they take byproducts, sugar byproducts from fruit like bananas or strawberry, anything, and they take that byproduct and then they soak the beans in that, and then over time it extracts the decaf without extracting as much of the coffee's essence. And because it's in fruit, you get a little bit more sweetness imparted on it, whereas the water process, it just strips, doesn't add anything. Yeah. And so this decaf method it's not like really adding much, it's just the method that we're taking the caffeine out is more palatable and overall a better tasting cup of coffee, which has been really the pursuit of coffee roasters all around the world for a long time, is how do I make decaf good? It's something that no coffee shop wants to serve, but every coffee shop has to serve. I don't know the numbers, but at least 1 out of every 10 customers is going to want decaf, whether for whatever reason. So how do you do that well? And it really comes down to where you're getting it from and how did they process it. And so we found that this is a really good decaf. Obviously it's our coffee, so we think it's good, but I've had a lot of different decafs and they're almost always disappointing. This one is not. So
yeah, good anecdote is yesterday we had a blind tasting with some friends and we had that sugarcane natural decaf on the table. They didn't know what it was. They were like, I think this might be the Ethiopian core. Oh, this might be like, no. It's you're missing it. Hold on, try and taste it a little bit. Like, oh, there's a little bit of, caramel in there. I just don't know. Is this a Brazil? It's like, nope, it's a decaffeinated, it's a sugar cane decaffeinated product. And they're like, wow, no way. And it's great. It's great. And that's exactly what that's the whole idea for us is if you're gonna have coffee, it better be good coffee. And if you're gonna do decaf, some people can only do decaf. Well, still, there are fantastic options available. So why not go for it?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, Nick, coffee shops. So I got one last question here before we kind of wrap things up. I don't know if you guys have thought about this yet. If not, I don't mean to put you on the spot. Are you guys planning on opening a local storefront at some point, or are you really focusing the business model on making it there and then shipping it out to other coffee shops or wholesalers or individual consumers?
yeah, we're doing both.
Yep.
I mean, ultimately that the focus is both. Initially our focus was online sales and roasting quality coffee and shipping it out around the country, that kind of thing. But we came to realize that really two things. That takes time to build that sort of business. Like you can't really rush it. And unless you're like chasing after influencers who have humongous audiences.
Sure.
And even that, like it's not exactly an organic way of doing it, and it's not guaranteed success. You might get a spike of sales or something, but there's no guarantee that that's going to be the foundation of your business. And so we just kind of realized this is going to take time. This is how we're going to scale this business. But in order for us to take advantage of what's right in front of us, our local community. We want to sell them coffee. How do we sell them coffee? Well, the best way to sell coffee is to brew good coffee and give it to them, put it in their hand and let them drink it. Yeah. And so we're like, well, we need to do that. And we happen to be in a space that's beautiful. It's awesome. It's new. It's a new building. It's opening up. The co-working part of it's opening up within a couple weeks. And so we tried to time it up to where we could start serving drinks at the same time. So yes, what we're doing right now, we're starting out with like really nice coffee carts. Basically, we took tables and had a local machinist weld the frame together and add a bottom plate so that we could put some plywood down, so that we can, and then put casters on so we can wheel it around. Mm-hmm.
Focus on that for catering and special events, but also a hybrid that we can have here, which I suppose I could show you off when we're done. I could just walk around a bit.
Sure.
Yeah, so that way it would be married here for a little while, and then every now and then we could do a wedding, or we could do a farmer's market like we will on Saturdays, or we can do all sorts of other things and events and stuff like that.
But God willing, we will have a permanent coffee shop within the year or so. You know, mm-hmm. Our landlord is really interested in doing something like that in this space. And so he's happy with us having our coffee carts in here for now, but he's like, you know, I'd love to like build a coffee shop for you, and you guys can just populate it with equipment, coffee, and serve coffee. So that's a high likelihood. We'll see how things go.
Yeah. Well, that sounds great, and I appreciate you guys sharing everything about this process and who you are and your story. I hope this video reaches all the people around the country and maybe the world who watch this channel and love coffee and want to support fellow Orthodox Christians instead of the beast in whatever face it may be appearing at any given time. So for people who are watching this or listening to it and want to buy some of your coffee, where can they order it from you?
Great question. You can go right on our website at loreroasters.com. It's on the back of your bag. I've got cards with it, but also I can have the link. We can probably put that in the description. I'm sure we can, or however you'd like to do that for the video. loreroasters.com, and then we've also got our social media. We're main on Instagram because this is a very visual and experiential product, and it's just a lot of fun. My wife does all the videography and photography, and she's so creative. She just has a lot of fun with that. So there's a lot of fun happening on Instagram.
That's Lore Coffee Roasters?
Yeah, at Lore Coffee Roasters. And same with Facebook. If you are interested in using Facebook, you have Facebook, you can follow us there. And I believe she has them being dual posted. So all of our content should be available on both.
Okay.
Both and Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah, send me all the links you guys have. I'll include them all in the description below here, so that anyone who wants to watch your content, get more familiar with you, or pick up some coffee for themselves will be able to do so. Is there anything else you guys would like to share about yourselves or your company before we close out here?
None of it would have happened if it wasn't with God's blessing. That's for sure. It is so starkly obvious that, you know, this is something that he has okayed us for us to do, in a sense, at least up to this point. We don't know what the whole end or like the whole culmination of it is, you know, yet. It could be just for it all to get big and crumble and teach us a lesson. We don't know. You know, whatever it is, whatever comes, glory to God for that. That's great.
Amen. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys for your time today. And I look forward to getting this video out to the people who need to watch it.
Sure. Thanks, man. Thanks for being flexible, too.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
All right. Well, you guys have a good night. All right.
All right. You too. See ya.
See you later.